At 2:51 a.m., 8 Ukrainian FP-1 class strike drones crossed the defense perimeter of Hvardiska airfield from two directions at once. Long-range, fixed-wing, 55-kilogram warhead. 75 seconds earlier, the base's two Pantsir S-1 crews had killed 8 identical drones approaching from the north. Every one destroyed. Screens clean. A perfect defense. These were not the same 8. They were aimed at 2 buildings the base could not afford to lose. And the men inside had no idea that 75 seconds of clean sky was all the warning they were going to get. Before dawn, both hangars would be burning. 93 minutes before those screens went clean, 16 of those same FP-1 class drones had launched from dispersed positions across Ukrainian-controlled territory. Each drone climbed south toward Crimea on pre-programmed coordinates. No pilot steered it, and no operator could change its target after launch. 15 drones launched on schedule. The 16th did not. Its piston engine surged and dropped below stable RPM. The booster could not ignite while the main engine oscillated. The crew cycled fuel, ignition, and control checks, and every second on the rail cost another 2.7 kilometers of separation from the group already climbing south toward Crimea. At 160 kilometers per hour, a 2-minute 20-second delay meant the straggler would arrive 6.2 kilometers behind its cell, alone, with no formation to share the defense's attention. 42 minutes. That was the window. Inside 2 Hvardiska hangars, ground crews were preparing a concentrated package of Shahed strike drones for dispersal to multiple launch points before dawn. Once those airframes moved, the fixed coordinates loaded into those 16 warheads would hit empty buildings. The crew launched it anyway. Keeping it on the ground saved 1 drone. Sending it gave them 1 more chance to hit a hangar while the Shaheds were still inside. The first 8 took the obvious route, a loose arc from the north, 400 to 700 meters apart, flying low and loud enough for piston engine noise to precede them. Their coordinates pointed at open support areas, not the hangars. Their job was to be seen. Russia's air surveillance network, layered radars with a local detection horizon of roughly 39 kilometers for a target at 60 meters, picked them up with about 14 minutes and 38 seconds of warning. Time enough for the Pantsir pair to work. 30 kilometers out, the drones entered the base's satellite navigation jamming zone. Satellite navigation updates degraded across the formation. One drone's inertial system accumulated too much error. It nosed into the steppe short of the perimeter and broke apart in the dirt. 7 remained. The Pantsir S-1, a mobile point defense system carrying 12 missiles and twin 30mm autocannons per vehicle, opened fire from inside 20 kilometers. 2 vehicles could track and fire at 8 drones at once. The wave was exactly 8 drones, every slot filled. 10 missiles came off the rails across both vehicles. 5 found their targets, bright flashes scattered across the northern approach, each one a drone reduced to falling debris. Proximity bursts and fragmented tracks complicated the picture, but the pair held its locks and worked the queue. 2 drones survived past the missile envelope and crossed into the 4-kilometer gun zone. At 160 kilometers per hour, 4 kilometers gave the gunners 90 seconds. The 30mm cannons shredded both before they reached the perimeter. The 8th drone was already wreckage in the dirt, the one the jamming had killed. 8 drones, 8 dead. The pair had stopped the entire raid. On the screens, the sky held nothing but fading returns. The pair still had 14 missiles in the tubes. Kill assessment reports began moving through the base network. Fire crews logged coordinates for wreckage recovery. The defense had performed exactly as the manufacturer's manual described. For the next 75 seconds, that assessment was correct. A 2-vehicle Pantsir pair can track and fire at 8 airborne targets at the same time. The first wave had contained exactly 8, not because the Ukrainians couldn't afford more, but because 8 was the number that filled every targeting slot and left nothing in reserve. The first 8 drones had been sent to die, and they had done their job. Wave 2 appeared from 2 bearings before the crews had finished confirming their kills. 4 drones from the west, 4 from the southeast. The pair swung toward them with 14 missiles left and 14 kilometers of missile range to work with. The western cell, 4 drones in a 2+2 formation, closed on Hangar A from the west at 60 meters. Inside that hangar, crews hunched over 3 programming consoles were loading strike coordinates into the next batch of Shaheds, converting stored airframes into weapons, 1 navigation kit at a time. The SSU called this building the Brain Room. The Shaheds on the ramp outside were replaceable hardware. These consoles were not, and the 4 drones carrying warheads toward them had crossed inside 16 kilometers. 2 Pantsir missiles came off the rails toward the lead pair. The drones kept flying straight toward Hangar A, pre-programmed, unable to turn, while the missiles closed the gap from below. Both found their targets. The lead pair came apart in mid-air, wreckage tumbling across the western approach. 2 of the 4 drones aimed at the Brain Room were gone. 2 remained. But the Pantsir crews were already tracking 4 more drones converging from the southeast. They could not fire at everything from every direction at once. The rear pair pushed through. On an elevated watch position between the hangars, a thermal observer scanned the low-altitude gaps where the Pantsir radar lost targets in ground clutter. He caught a heat source moving below the roofline before the fire control radar stabilized a track. He walked the bearing to the Cord 12.7mm crew beside him. The Cord, a heavy machine gun effective against air targets inside roughly 1,500 meters, opened fire. At 160 kilometers per hour, the engagement window lasted about 34 seconds. It was enough. The 3rd drone disintegrated under a stream of 12.7mm rounds. 1 remained. A Pantsir proximity burst caught it at close range. The fragmentation sheared a control surface. The drone rolled, dropped below the local structure line, and disappeared from the radar picture. The Pantsir crew logged it as a probable kill. 30 seconds of silence followed. No contact on the screen. No heat source on the observer's optic. The drone had fallen. Or so the data said. It hadn't. The autopilot still had authority. Damaged, descending at an angle steeper than its programming intended, the last drone of Wave 2A arrested its roll and held a trajectory that intersected with the broad roof bay of Hangar A. It struck at an oblique angle. The warhead punched through the roof and detonated inside the mission systems zone. Overhead cable trays ruptured. A power cart shorted and caught fire. Debris and fragmentation sprayed across programming benches and diagnostic equipment. Smoke poured upward through the hole in the roof. The building stayed standing. The equipment beneath the blast did not. 45 kilometers away, the Ukrainian observation drone, circling at altitude, lost its feed. Electronic interference had cut the signal. The operators stared at a frozen screen. No way to confirm whether Hangar A had been hit or whether the drone they'd watched drop below the roofline had crashed in empty dirt. They sat in silence and waited for the feed to reconnect. The southeastern cell hit the defense perimeter while smoke from the Hangar A impact was still climbing. 4 drones, offset approach, target Hangar B, where ground crews were strapping 10 Duran-2 strike drones and 6 Gerbera decoys into transport cradles, racing to tow them to dispersed launch points before first light. The 4 drones carried fixed coordinates for the rear service annex, and the lead drone was already inside 14 kilometers when the first Pantsir missile caught it. 3 remained. The second drone veered off course and struck open ground south of the hangar complex. 11 minutes inside the jamming zone had pushed its navigation roughly 200 meters off target. The explosion was bright. In the smoke, the darkness, and the overlapping disappearance of multiple radar tracks, both sides briefly read the flash as a possible target impact. The observation feed was still frozen. The Pantsir pair could not tell which building, if any, had been hit. The last on-time drone threaded the confusion. It crossed the 4-kilometer gun zone while both Pantsir crews were still trying to resolve which flash was a hit and which was a miss. No gun traversed to meet it. Its warhead detonated against the rear wall of Hangar B. Power distribution tripped instantly. Ventilation stopped. Smoke accumulated inside the bay instead of clearing. Debris blocked the tow lane between the cradles and the hangar doors. The rear wall opened. Cracked panels and torn service access, creating a path inward that the building's designers had never intended. The main roof held, the rear was breached, and then the sky went quiet. No stable inbound targets remained on any screen. The Pantsir guns fell silent. Radar cycled through its sweep and painted nothing but the dissipating clutter of earlier engagements and the expanding thermal signatures from 2 burning buildings. The firing tempo dropped to 0. Emergency vehicles started moving. Fire crews in protective gear approached the damaged rear annex of Hangar B. Technicians began assessing whether the airframes and support cradles inside could be pulled out through the front, whether the next night's strike package was damaged, merely smoke-covered, or still recoverable enough to disperse. Inside Hangar B, crews moving toward the bay found the tow lane blocked by fallen debris. Power was out and smoke hung trapped in the dead air. But the main roof was intact and the airframes were not yet burning. A recovery team was already pushing toward the front doors. The clock that had been working for the SSU was now working against them. 45 kilometers away, the observation drone's data link reconnected. The feed returned to a picture of 2 thermal blooms, one at Hangar A, growing slowly, one at Hangar B, concentrated around the rear wall, and 0 incoming tracks. The operators could see heat, not contents. They could not confirm what was burning, what was intact, or whether the concentration they had come to destroy was already being dragged out through the front doors. For 2 minutes and 20 seconds, the raid appeared to be over. The thermal observer saw it first. A single heat source, low, moving against the smoke-dark background northeast of the base. Engine heat, a piston exhaust signature, where the radar showed nothing but clutter and debris returns. He turned away from the Hangar B fire and pointed. The last drone, the one that had almost been scrubbed on its launcher 2 minutes and 20 seconds ago, 6.2 kilometers behind the cell it was supposed to fly with, alone. The surveillance network struggled to form a clean track. The contact was low, isolated, intermittent, initially classified as debris, a terrain return, or one of the damaged survivors from the earlier waves. The system needed time to build a consistent plot. Time was the one thing the geometry did not provide. By the time the network reclassified the contact as a valid inbound threat, the drone had crossed inside 2 kilometers. The Pantsir pair still held 6 missiles. On paper, 6 missiles against one slow drone should have been straightforward. But the drone was still closing, and the Pantsir S-1 missile needs 1.2 kilometers to arm its proximity fuse after launch. At 160 kilometers per hour, the distance between 1.2 kilometers and 0 takes 27 seconds to cross. The drone had already eaten that distance while the network was still building a track. 6 missiles sat in their tubes, all loaded, all armed. None could fire. The floor had closed under them. The guns were all that remained. Both Pantsir vehicles and the Cord opened fire simultaneously. 30mm rounds and 12.7mm tracers converged on the lone drone from 3 positions. Rounds struck the tail. A control surface tore free. The drone began descending, not in a controlled glide, but in the unsteady sink of a machine losing its grip on the air. It looked like it would crash short. The Pantsir's fire control radar tracked it dropping below the local roofline. The Cord crew lost visual in the smoke. But its fixed coordinate, the same set of numbers loaded onto its navigation board 95 minutes earlier, the numbers it could not change, still pointed through the rear service zone of Hangar B, the same wall the first impact had already opened. Momentum and a half-functional autopilot carried the damaged airframe through the breach. The warhead detonated low, inside the bay, driving blast and debris deeper into the space where the Ready Strike package sat on its cradles. Wall panels and service equipment blew inward. Batteries, fuel residue, and severed wiring fed secondary fires. Cradles shifted. Airframes that had been fueled and staged hours earlier sat in smoke they could not vent, surrounded by heat they could not escape. The roof held. The rear did not. 16 drones, 13 stopped, an 81% kill rate. The Pantsir pair fired 18 of 24 missiles and destroyed 10 drones between missiles and guns. The Cord crew killed 1. The jamming cell brought down 2. By any standard of air defense, Havardiska's garrison had performed. It was not enough. 3 warheads, costing under €1 million combined, reached 2 buildings that held the throughput capacity for Russia's next Shahed strike wave. 1 punched through the roof of a mission preparation cell and scattered the equipment that programs drones to fly. 2 hit the rear of a storage hangar where a mixed strike and decoy package sat concentrated and ready to move. The hangars didn't fall. They didn't need to. What burned inside was the capability, not the concrete. The defense didn't fail because it was bad. It failed because the attack was designed around its exact capacity. 8 channels, 8 decoys, 75 seconds of false quiet. And the 16th drone, the one that almost never launched, arrived after the tempo dropped and the missiles ran out of geometry. Somewhere inside Crimea, another hangar is already being loaded with the next batch of Shaheds. The programming consoles may take weeks to replace. The airframes will arrive faster. The clock is already running again.